with not much of a canopy and low-lying vegetation. This is the ecosystem that settled out of the 3 million years of the Pleistocene, which was characterized by dramatic glacial events followed by melt. And there were like maybe a dozen of them. And of course we did not get ice down here, but what we got was dramatic sea level rise and fall. And so it's not hard to imagine that as this process was happening, that sand would be washing over the entirety of Florida at times, and then leaving to maybe land. The ocean would be like 300 miles out that away from where we are now, and happening again and again. So what it left were soils that are fine and sandy. I mean, you look down here, look at what's at your feet. Fine, sandy soil, nutrient poor, low topography, which sort of prevents runoff too. When we get rains, we don't get a lot of runoff. It just kind of stands there because it's got nowhere to go. Everything's so flat.
Yeah.
And it doesn't percolate down really fast either. And key to all of this too, for these plants, was fire. Because Florida has the most lightning strikes of any state in the country.
Really?
And we have like 8,000 ground fires still set a year. Of course, most of them are put out, extinguished. But before there was any possibility of doing that, those fires, ground fires, low ground fires, not massive conflagrations, would go for miles and miles and days and days. So the plants that could survive these rigors were kind of very special plants. And we're going to talk about these today, how they are able to live in such a rigorous sort of environment, how they work together even. This, as I say, when Ponce de Leon arrived here 500 years ago, most of Florida looked like this. But of course the Europeans began to change things. And then in the 19th century, Florida was logged at a rate faster than the tropics are logged today.
Wow.
And so this ecosystem that you see doesn't feel like what we think of Florida very much, but in fact, it's a relic. And there are important stories here that we hope to tell you today.
Can you tell us the Lee County Commissioners?
Pardon me?
Can you tell us the story of the Lee County Commissioners?
Well, I would not be the one to be doing that, but hopefully they're getting the message and understanding. Yeah, thank you. Ron, would you like to say anything before we head out?
Oh, not really. I'm ready to go. Let's go.
All right.
Okay.
All right.
Awesome.
Okay, time that fleabane is in the name. It was used in order to put on bedding or roundhouses or whatever in order to drive fleas and bugs away. So this beautiful little plant is oak leaf fleabane. This little plant here, and we're going to see a lot of this too, is star rush white top, and it's a sedge. And it's not only beautiful, but interestingly, sedges normally spread their seeds by wind. This little guy does not. Its bracts actually attract insect pollinators. So it pollinates through the use of insects. And as you can imagine, Keys, if you know anything about legumes, they have nitrogen fixating nodules in their roots. And so they're able to actually grab nitrogen out of the air and incorporate it into their roots. And nitrogen, of course, is pretty important for growth. But they not only help themselves with that, they also help the plants around them. So that's a pretty cool feature of this plant. The flowers, the seeds, when they fall, are great for feeding quail and other birds. They're very small little seeds, but very nutritious. Very nutritious seeds. A flower that is very common in the Flatwoods. This is called, and this has got an interesting story. This is called Pineland
Lantana?
heliotrope.
Oh.
Pineland heliotrope. And you notice that it's a little white flower? Well, if you go south, if you go into the Everglades, you will find this plant also, and it will be yellow.
Wow.
And we are on very acidic soil here. Not bad. And the down in the Keys and the Everglades, the soil is more calcareous. In other words, the sand down there comes from shells and the marine environment, whereas, believe it or not, our sand here comes originally from the Appalachians. We're at some point, they were as high as the Himalayas. They eroded. Then they washed into the Gulf, and the Gulf, then the sea, washed them back up here. So we have sand that is based on quartz, as opposed to shells and things like that.
That is
So
pretty.
anyway, that's right
on the acidity level of the soil,
Maybe.
like a hydrangea.
Yes.
The more acidic the soil, then I forget which way it goes. but
Exactly.
the color changes.
Exactly.
Before we get too far into
Yeah.
this, I wanted to point out, this is poison ivy.
Oh.
And it is really all over the place right now.
That's poison ivy?
Yes, it is. This right here.
Don't touch it.
I'm not going to touch it. But, yeah, so
Don't stray.
yeah.
Yeah.
Because these two plants have a great story. And Elijah, this is going to blow your mind on the sable palm. To begin with, this is a sable palm. It is
Wow.
the Florida state tree, which is pretty funny because it's not really a tree. It's a palm. And the difference is trees are what are called dicots. They have branches. Palms are monocots. They are more closely related to grasses and corn and bamboo. They do not branch. They're very, very fibrous-y. In fact, sometimes you can look up at the palms and see the fiber coming off of them. But all the plants in an environment like this are going to have to contend with all the things I was talking about before, but we also have hurricanes. We have darn serious winds. And so they've got to be able to withstand that also. So what this palm does is when it drops a palm seed and it germinates, instead of it coming up straight up like most plants do and thriving, instead it sends its trunk down. And it may send it down as far as a meter. Like, that's almost a yard. So the trunk is growing down, and once it reaches about a meter, it actually makes a J and comes back up. This can take up to 60 years. 60 years.
Wow.
So what is the advantage here? Why would a plant develop this kind of an adaptation? Well, you can have a whole stand of these palm trees burn out or blow over, and you've still got
Protected.
exactly a
seedlings
protected
coming up.
group coming up. So when some of us were driving through Florida ever so many years ago, a seed might have dropped and we might just be seeing the leaves of the palm emerge out of the ground now.
What,
Pretty amazing.
Now, is that specific?
kind-
I'm sorry. Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, go ahead.
I just wonder if that was just specific to the sable?
Yes.
Okay.
It is, because the saw palmetto over here grows its trunk horizontally to the ground. So it's got a different strategy, a different adaptation in order to withstand the rigors of the environment that it's in. Now, we can't see that with this particular saw palmetto right now, but when we get farther on down the trail, we'll be able to see the trunks actually growing along the ground.
Hey.
You'll just have to believe me now.
So, could I ask you,
Yeah.
speaking of this particular specimen here, about what age would this pretty darn good sized tree be?
Well, if you're talking about after it emerges out of the ground, they grow much faster.
Okay.
And I don't know what that is. Do you, Ron?
I would guess that that tree is probably about 15 years old
Okay.
after it's come out of the ground. When they get older, you see these boots? They call these boots, where the branches are broken off.
Right.
And when they get, the way you can tell an older tree is when they get older, these boots will fall off.
Aw.
And the older trees won't have them. And of course they'll be taller. But I would say, I would just guess from my experience, that's probably about 15 years old.
Cabbage palm?
This is also called the cabbage palm. And it's called the cabbage palm because 1 year's growth, if you cut that out, and it's always going to appear at the top, remember, because no branching, the growth bud is always at the top, you can eat it. And it was they would make cabbage hearts of palm. They do make hearts of palm out of it from the ones that are harvested in Brazil. But it's the same plant. It is absolutely the same plant. Still a sable palm. Yeah, and if you go to the La Belle, the Cabbage Palm Festival, you'll have a chance to try it sometime. I think that happens in March. I want to show you something that may help you to distinguish sometimes between the sable palm and the saw palmetto. You're not going to feel it, I guess, on these, but oftentimes the stem feels like it would cut your hand. But look at how this palm is. Look at how right here it seems to have almost like a wrist. And so it's like this palm is giving you a high five. With this palm, the sable palm, the branch almost seems to come out to the very tip. There's no wrist. Almost the very tip of the frond. And so that's one way that you can kind of tell the difference.